Happy evening, all of y'all.
Happy evening,
Happy
sir.
evening, sir.
Happy
evening, sir.
Great to connect with y'all. All refreshed and relaxed. Refreshed. Okay. Should I put on my video? Is it on or?
It's off, sir.
Okay.
Now
Is
it's
it
on, sir.
It's
Now
on.
it's on.
Okay, students. There was a famous saying which I had read long back, and I think so. I told you this saying when you all had attended your foundation class. The saying was that yesterday is a cancelled check. You cannot cash it. Tomorrow is a promissory note. You cannot rely on it. Today is hard cash. Spend it. So I know you all have done some of your exams. Some of your exams are done, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So yesterday is a cancelled check. You cannot cash it. Whatever is over is over. It's only a dream. It's just a part of your memory. Whatever is done is done. You might have done well. You might have done okay. Whatever it is, but there is no control over the past, right? Whatever you might try, you will not be able to control the past, right? Anything, anybody, any institute of chartered accountants allows you to change the paper after you've come out, and if you found not done well, no, right? So it's over. So there's no point wondering about that. Tomorrow is a promissory note. You cannot rely on it, right? So you don't have to spoil your tomorrow for this. And today is hard cash. Spend it. Whatever is the present available for you, whatever is presently available for you, that is the time which you have to spend for your best possible way. So you don't have to take tension about the past. There was this very famous story which I want to just tell you. There was this princess. She was sitting on a side of a big pond, and as she was looking at, she had all her soldiers, guards, and all her friends. And as she was looking down into the pond, her crown fell into the big pond, and it splashed and it went inside the pond. And all the guards, seeing this, they got so agitated, they jumped into the pond to get out the crown. And because of that, there was so much of mud and debris, and everything was being splashed out. They couldn't find the crown only because it was full of mud and debris. All of them had jumped into, and all of them were shouting, "Where's the crown? Where's the crown?" There was a man who was passing by, and he smiled at the princess and he said, "I can get that crown for you." She said, "How?" He said, "Just look at me." He sat down and he started playing his flute. And he played that flute so beautifully. The musical notes were so good that the guards stopped and they started listening to him. Her friends who had also got into the pond came out and they started listening to him. And in the next 15 minutes, he played the most enchanting tunes, the best tunes of his flute. And by that time, 15 minutes had passed, all the mud in the pond had settled down, and now the crown was easily visible in the clear pond. He jumped into the pond, withdrew the crown, and gave it to the princess. The reason I told you the story is sometimes your mind is like that, when you have so many thoughts going on. Okay, I haven't done well. I should have done this. What's going to happen to my future? Where will I do? If I don't do well in this subject, what can I do? All that is only going to bring out more mud, and you will never get the treasure in your life. So just keep this in mind. Forget about it. Whatever has happened has happened. You just have to refresh and relax. Yes or no?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Now coming to the point, let's discuss the paper. You all know that your papers of 100 marks, and out of that 30 marks are MCQs. Yes or no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And out of the 30 MCQs, around 15 will be from strategic management. I think so you can easily score 13 or 14 out of them. Most of them are very, very easy questions from the chapters. So 15 MCQs is taken care of. Now, out of the remaining 35 marks, you all know that the first question is of 5 marks, which is generally compulsory, right? Okay, if you'll have gone through the question paper, the first 5 marks is compulsory, and the next, there are 4 questions of 10 marks each. You have to answer any 3, right? So that makes it 5 plus 30, that makes it 35, right? And most of the questions which come in that 10 mark questions are 5 marks or 4 2, or it also comes, the last question, I think so, it comes 8 marks and 2 marks, correct or no? So you'll have to choose your questions very carefully among them. The first question, 5 marks, from which chapter it comes, there is no guarantee. Usually it comes from chapter 2. Sometimes it's come out of chapter 6, which I've also seen. Chapter 2 is your competitive strategy, dynamics of competitive strategy, right? And your chapter 6 is your functional strategy. So you just see out of that, and the remaining 3. So you won't get any question which is more than 3 or 4 marks. So you'll have to plan your answers in a proper manner, right? Now, what are these questions which come in these 35 marks? Generally, you might get one case study or one small case study, which generally comes like, they'll say there are 2 managers, Mr. Vitthal and Mr. Raman. Mr. Vitthal delegates all the work and he inspires his workers, while Mr. Raman is the person who observes and does the work on his side. Discuss the styles of leadership. So you'll have to say one is a transactional leader, one is a transformational leader. If you'll have gone through the question papers, you'll come to know there'll be generally one case study. Generally, it's either EIS or strategic, but generally it's also strategic management. So in that question, out of those 3 questions or 4 questions, you'll get that, right? So be careful while you're choosing. And if you are attempting a case study in strategic management, out of those 4 questions, if you're going to attempt the case study, remember I told you the way in which you will attempt the case study. I told you to remember, write down the facts of the case, write down the analysis of the case, and then write down the conclusion of the case. So FAC, what will it be? Facts, analysis, and conclusion. Right or no? So divide your answer in those 3 parts: facts of the case, analysis of the case, conclusion of the case. Now coming to the answers, how do you write your answers? I've already told you that you have to follow the OBC approach. I told you OBC is the ABC of writing your exams. O is the opening, B is the body, and C is the conclusion. So if they ask you a question, give the opening. This is, suppose they ask you, what are the, explain the BCG matrix. So you'll have to give first the opening, what is the BCG matrix? It's a portfolio matrix which was decided by the Boston consultant. Then give the body, draw the matrix, explain those 4 elements: cash cow, dogs, okay, your question marks and your stars, and then give the conclusion. This is very useful in whatever way. So always have an opening, body, and conclusion. Now going through the questions, the chapters in a brief way. So these are the ways you tackle. So remember, you have 8 chapters in strategic management. The first chapter is the introduction to strategy and strategic management. Now, what is important in this chapter is basically there are 2 or 3 things. One is the levels of strategy. Remember, corporate level strategy, business level strategy, and functional level strategy. You also have strategies for non-profit organizations, strategy for educational institutions, strategy for government, strategies for medical organizations. And in that chapter, you also have the meaning of strategy, meaning of strategic management, and how strategic management originated, business policy, from business policy to into strategic planning to strategy to strategic management, and the importance of strategic management. So that chapter is quite an easy chapter. It's not. Now the second chapter is the most important chapter, which is called the dynamics of competitive strategy. If you remember, right from the beginning, you have what is core competency. That's the biggest chapter, I think, so 50 to 60 pages. And I told you an easy way to remember business competency, core competency. Remember, I told you vada, rava, idli, sambar. Remember, it should be valuable, it should be rare, it should be costly to imitate, and it should be non-substitutable. What it should be? Non. V for valuable, R for rare, imitatable. It should not be costly to imitate, and it should be non-substitutable S, correct? On a core competency. And also we did, when does a company get a competitive advantage? And in this chapter, the most important part are the different types of matrices. We discuss Igor-Ansoff matrix, we discuss the BCG matrix, we discuss the ADL matrix, we discuss the GE matrix. We also discussed what are the various aspects of competition, competitive landscape, triggers of change, etc. So it's a very, I think so it's the biggest chapter in your syllabus. Your chapter 3 is strategic management, I think so. Strategic planning. You have that goals, vision, mission, difference between a vision and a mission, and then the elements of strategic intent. If you remember, business definition, business model. When you define the business, it's business definition. Business model is basically concerned with how you're going to earn your income. Then you have your vision, mission, goals, and objectives. What? Vision, mission, goals, and
Objectives.
okay. And we also discussed that the steps in strategic planning. So all that gets covered in that particular chapter. That's chapter 3. It's not so big. Chapter 4, if you remember, is your corporate level strategy. What it is your corporate level? In corporate level strategies, you have the grand strategies. What are the grand strategies? The strategy relating to expansion, stability, retrenchment, and combination, correct? And there are advantage of stability strategy, disadvantages. When can a company follow stability strategy? And in expansion, we have all the different types of expansion, intensification, diversification. If you remember, in diversification, we have integration, where you have the forward integration, backward integration, horizontal integration. If you remember, we did all that. So look into all those aspects, because they might ask you different expansion strategies, and they might ask you this in the MCQs also, right? So discuss. And retrenchment strategies, you have the important strategy, turnaround strategy, that generally comes every time. What are the symptoms for turnaround? How does the company implement a turnaround strategy, right? So that is nothing but what we discussed in that chapter. That is a corporate level strategy. After the corporate level strategy, we went into the business level strategy. In business level strategy, that was chapter number 5. We discussed the 5-force model of Michael Porter. Do you remember the 5 forces? Bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, number of rivals in the industry, threat of new entrants, and threat of substitutes. And we also discussed the 3 strategies given by Michael Porter for a business to succeed. Cost leadership, if you remember, differentiation, and focus strategy. And we discussed all the aspects of cost leadership, differentiation, and focus. And there was one more strategy which was not given by Michael Porter, which is called the best cost provider. What it was called, which is a combination of differentiation and cost leadership. So we discussed all that, and I gave you examples and all. So that entire chapter is based on the 5-force model and those 3 types of strategies. Then in chapter 6, we discussed something called as the functional strategies. If you remember, we did the different types of functional strategies, marketing strategies. In marketing strategies, we had enlightened marketing and remarketing, demarketing. We had different aspects of production strategy, operation strategy, finance strategy, logistics strategy, R&D strategy. And this is also a very big chapter, and they might ask you a question from here, because this chapter 2 and chapter 6 are generally very important, right? So we discussed all the functional level strategies. Chapter 7, if you remember, was organizational structure and leadership, where we discussed the strategy and structure. Anybody remembers which comes first, strategy or structure? Always strategy comes first, and then it's followed by structure. And remember, we had done a lot of presentations from your batch: simple organizational structure, functional organizational structure, strategic business unit structure, matrix organizational structure, hourglass structure, network organizational structure. Generally, they'll ask you one of these in a 5-mark question as what is this type of structure with the advantages and disadvantages. And we also discussed the different types of leadership. I already told you transactional leadership, transformational leadership, etc. And then we went on to chapter 8, which was strategic implementation and control. In that, we discussed what is strategic implementation. We discussed the different types of controls, operational control, strategic control. We discussed strategic audit. And we discussed two important strategies which are being followed nowadays by companies. One is called as BPR, business process reengineering, and one is called benchmarking. What it is called as? Benchmarking. So BPR and benchmarking, please go through all that. So this was basically your entire strategic management syllabus covered in a nutshell, right? What do you have to do? Refresh and relax. Don't take worry about it. Go through all these chapters. Go through whatever you have studied. Now is the time for you to seep it in. Go through, put in your best effort today, because I told you, today is hard cash, spend it, make the best out of your future. And see, results are never in your control. I've seen people who have done extremely well and then they have not cleared by 1 mark. I've seen students who have done average and so results are never in your control. What is in your control? Doing your best. Some of y'all will clear, some of y'all may not clear, but that doesn't make a difference. Your life will do well, you will do well in life. So you don't have to take too much tension. There was a man, he was sitting on the beach, and another man walked by and he said, "Are you relaxing?" That man looked at him and said, "No, I'm Milkha Singh." So all of y'all relax, do well in your exams, all the best. I'll keep you in my prayers, and God bless all of y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay?
sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Malini ma'am, can I move?
Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Sir will be here in 2 minutes, guys. Sorry.
Hello, can you hear me? Fantastic.
Hi, sir.
So hope your journey is going great. We are just about the final, probably if I would say that, just a final showdown, just, a couple of things left, right? So let me quickly jump into the most important thing for today's discussion, right? The R2R strategy. And could you please confirm if my slides are visible? Fantastic. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, and we're going to keep it very crisp and short. This is something which I really liked, and it's called as the survival bias. And it makes a lot of sense to speak about this today. When these world wars were taking place, one of the things which was analyzed was, where should I probably analyze, or which part of the body of the plane did the most number of gunshots target. So they analyzed that all these red spots is where it was targeted, and they came into conclusion that if I strengthen these places, I will actually be able to survive. But the reality, it is not that these red spots, it is the points where there is no red, where the moment it hits, it is having a possibility of it to fail, right? And that is where we are actually learning what exactly is this survival bias. And today it is more apt because we just are left with 2 papers, and it makes a lot more sense to focus on what exactly you need to do. While on one side, Rajdeep sir did make a mention of the strategic management piece, let me quickly jump into the EIS, and we all know what is the order of preparation. It all starts with first the fundamentals, information system and its components. When I use the word information system and its components, here is a fairly lengthy chapter. You all know that very well. Please bear in mind the concepts are very, very critical out here. Okay, if you thinking that it is taking a longer for me to finish this, yes, you are right. It will take longer than your other chapters. So please have a watch over time when you're preparing this. The moment you're done with this, your financial and accounting systems is the simplest of all of them, right? It's a very simple, starting from your masters, transactions, ledgers, and all of those, right? We'll come to important areas a little later. Followed by automated business process. Remember, this is the chapter where you have the flowchart, and flowchart has been consistently a question which most of the examination it does occur, right? And then we move to a specialized area, which is a core banking, and last you have e-com, m-com, and emerging technology. In all these 5 chapters, remember one fundamental thing: you have concepts, you have the key risks, you have controls, and how you audit it. And that's essentially how all these 3 areas have been designed. And very important is, how do I answer the MCQs? Because multiple choice questions are very critical, right? Answering the MCQs become very critical. So how do I target that? This is unfortunately our situation today, right? Once we read the first MCQ answer, we are after reading the question, we are very happy. But if you read the two options, you are completely, what is this option? And if you read the fourth option, you are done, right? So how do I answer it? First and foremost, MCQs, please choose the best answer. Very, very, very important. You may have two answers which looks very close to each other. You need to figure out what is the best, right? I'm not discussing which, practice MCQ questions. You already have all of them, so I'm not going to that. Second is an analogy type where there's some sort of a logic. Say for example, if there is more humidity, what happens? The possibility of corrosion is high, right? So that is a possibility of a cause and effect. Then you have a reserve type. Be extremely careful with the word negative. It will say which of the following is not. In that examination tension, 99% of us, right, in the examination tension, we tend to overlook that word not or the negative connotation. So please be very, very cautious of that, right? And then you have your, obviously, one correct answer, whichever you are trying to do it, right? So how do I answer it? First, read the entire question completely. Answer it in your mind, or sometimes you have to follow the elimination approach. Whichever is wrong, you start eliminating it. Choose the best answer, as I keep on saying it. And the best answer, do not think think in an idealistic situation where you don't have budget constraints, where you don't have any sort of challenges, keeping independence in view, etc. Right? And always, whenever there's a question asked, as an auditor, which of the following you cannot do, right? Anything relating to implementation, he cannot do. Point number one. Point number two, wherever they give you three controls, preventive is better than a detective is better than a corrective, right? So these are fundamental truths we have to keep in mind. And obviously answer the question first, but please be very cautious when you're answering, because you have a MCQ paper, which is the Rangoli ways method in which you will answer. So first question you answer it for second, or second you answer for third, you are completely over, right? And make an educated guess. Sometimes you have to make an educated guess based on the logic. I've given you examples as well. One of these challenges which you will feel when you're answering the MCQ question is, hey, last two options, the option is C. This third question also, how can the option be C? Right? All these things are examination dilemma which you'll have, right? I'm seeing the smile in many of your faces, so I'm understanding that you have gone through it. So hang on, please relax. Okay, go based on the logic and do not go based on your, those sort of funny questions and gut feelings. And sometimes your multiple choice questions are something like this, right? So you have to sort of balance it out. Be very careful in terms of choosing it. There's a couple of sample questions just to give you that, set the right tone. Right now, if you look into this, here is a very, very straight question, which they give you an example or a scenario, and they ask you which type of error is this. Now, where can you expect these type of questions? My dear friends, these type of questions, let me tell you, wherever you find examples given in your material, these type of questions are guaranteed to come. So please be extremely cautious out there. What are the possibilities? If you read this, it is just an interchange. Now, instead of asking this sort of a question, they will say 35 was entered as 58, or 35 was entered as 53, correct? So it becomes a transposition error. Now, this is something where I call as an educated guess. There's a classical example of educated guess. Now, in a business continuity plan, you have emergency, backup, recovery, and test plan. So they themselves have given 4. But they are saying all of them are drafted, but one of them is major part is done before the disaster occurs. Now, which of them? Now, if you write all the 4, it may be adaptive to you, but the reality is not the case. The reality is there are only 2 plans where majority is done much before. And that, my dear friends, is what you do before is backup and you test it. So the answer would be option C. A few general tips. AIS paper, I keep on telling you have 3 things. One is the IT concepts. Chapter 3 is a classical example. Chapter 4, second part, you'll find a lot of technological concepts, right? Where it talks about mobile banking, we're talking about digital payments. We're talking about, artificial intelligence, IoT, machine learning. That's one side of it. Then you have the process and accounting related, which is purely your chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 5. It's a very, very simple thing, and general management, yeah, right? So what are a few basic things? Chain is as strong as the weakest link. So do not panic, right? Do not panic. There's just an extended form of common sense. You have heard most of these terminologies. Whenever you are reading any of these concepts, please relate it to the apps which you see, the transportation you do, your Ola, your Flipkart, your digital payments, all of this, you actually come across this. please quote examples wherever possible. Please quote examples, right? And always start with answer to question number. Give a paragraph where you're introducing and then write only in bullet points, no numbers. Okay, and I've already explained it why. Have a watch over time, because you have 3 hours. You have 2 papers of 50 marks each, right? And by 1.5 hours you have to complete 1 paper, but generally it will happen that 1 hour 45 minutes you tend to complete. Do not panic for the second paper. Which you want to write first, I will leave it to you. Don't try to do like Rajinikanth, I'll write both the papers, both the sides and things like that. So that may not probably work. If you are so great, then great, a bit extras, right? Okay, and for each chapter my suggestion is in my notes I have given towards the last something called as a lesson summary or a roundup. Please use that as a starting point for you to glance through the chapter. Again, once you're done with the chapter, go through that again to figure out, have you understood these concepts very, very clear, right? Related to the practical experience, please read the summary and the bullet points and the points which are mentioned in the material or handouts. Please make sure you write it. Okay, read the glossary, it is there towards the end, and any area which is with 4 to 8 bullet points, there is a possibility of that being asked in an examination question. When more than 8 to 10 points, I would suggest restrict it to 8, because normally maximum is 6 marks question. Beyond that they don't ask, but keep 2 points more, because reserve for bad dates. You never know which you'll forget during the examination, right? Give the bullet points as per the ICM material. Answer only in bullet points. I think I've already told you. Give a small introduction per mnemonic forms. For example, I told you boundary control, input control, processing control, right? I would have told you BICPOD, bicycle iPod, right? Something similar to that. And this is the chapter overview, which is already prepared in the notes, so please use that. If you do not have the copy of the notes or whatever reason, your study material itself has this, so use this but it comes in the preliminary part. As I told you, use it in the intro, and once you're done with the chapter, relook into this particular thing. What are the materials? Don't break your head too much. It's very, very simple. ICA material coupled with my handouts or notes. Suggested answer of ICAI. Please read through at least last 2 examinations. Okay. And if you are referring to the RTP, please check the RTP which is applicable for your exam plus the previous examination. Okay. And very important, there is this beautiful publication of MCQ by the institute. Please glance through it. It's about 100 pages, but you can finish it really in a jiffy. Why? You just pick up 10, 10, 10, because every chapter 20 questions are asked. Okay, so at one stretch, you just take up 10 questions, you take a break, or however you want to, you position yourself that way. Or you just pick up one particular chapter, finish it, jump into MCQ questions. That's a very good way in which you can cover it. An exam pattern, I think all of us are aware. We have 2 parts. Part 1 is MCQ, which all of us are aware, and it's typically 15 marks to be answered in OMR sheet. In your case, it will be 30 marks because of IT and SF. Part 2 is description. Total 5 questions. Question number 1 is compulsory. You need to answer any 3 out of the remaining. Please bear in mind, within part 2, you have section A and section B. So which means the part 1 will typically have, from an EIS standpoint, 15 questions or 15 marks. From an SM standpoint, 15 marks, right? And part 2 is concerned, you'll have section A, section B. Section A and section B both has to be answered in 2 separate answer scripts. So please be aware of it. So you'll have an MCQ, you'll have a section A, you'll have a section B. Okay, question number 1 is a short note question, normally for 5 marks. Question number 2 to 4 is around 10 marks with a combination of 4 plus 2, etc. Normally, one of these questions is a flowchart question for 6 marks. Question number 5 is an internal choice. So you have, it is basically 12 marks. So you have the 8-mark question, and for the 2-mark question, you have an internal choice, right? So that's how normally it works. Few important areas, very critical. Chapter number 1. Concept of business process management and automation. There are 8 steps. Those are very critical. Along with the example, please remember them. Okay. Second is enterprise risk management, risk and controls, and relationship between SA 315 and the COSO framework. There is a small mention of it, right? The step-by-step procedure. Then comes the most important, diagrammatic representation. 5 things: sales cycle, purchase cycle, revenue cycle, fixed asset cycle. Correct? These are the most important things, right? So when you look into these 3 to 4 cycles, that itself gives you a perspective of what to answer. And for all of them have standard risks: transaction, master, configuration. At a transaction level, what could happen? At a master level, what could happen? Configuration. The same thing which you write for order to cash, you can write it for procure to pay. But in order to cash, you'll write it from a debtor or a customer angle. From a procure to pay, you'll write it from a creditor or a vendor angle, right? Next, please draw a please give the diagrammatic representation please give a diagrammatic representation. That is very critical and very important. When you're giving the diagrammatic representation, don't overdo, just give the gist of it. In the material that are given some funny images or some sort of a person, human being, etc. Don't bother about all this. Just put a box, arrow mark, square, right? And flowchart, I've given you enough material to practice on flowchart. It is a very, very simple thing. Sometimes they will give you the flowchart and they will ask you to reproduce the results. So please be careful about it. And last is a very small component of the regulatory compliance requirements. I think that's a very small thing which you'll be able to do it. Sorry, why is this jumping the gun? Hang on a minute. Sorry. Chapter 2, the concept of data master transaction. Very critical. Short note questions you can expect. The accounting flow is a very simple thing. You do not worry about it. Front end versus back end, short note question with example it can come. ERP risks and controls, and how do you audit it, right? And then you have a role-based access control, RBAC we call it, right? Audit of ERP. Then the integration, those modules, please be very critical. And in each of the modules, there is one diagram. When I say the diagram, it's just a sort of an boxes with images or content. Please reproduce that. They could ask you any of those. FICO is one of the popular questions which is asked. What is the financial and control module? Then they ask you about CRM, supply chain. These are popular areas which they ask you. Some cases they've asked about quality also. Reporting and MIS is a very, very small section. Analytics and BI. Expect one question either on difference between both of them, etc. Then comes your chapter number 3. Very critical. It talks about a lot of things. So you need to be very, very precise and you need to do it very quickly. Concepts of hardware, device, networks, switches, routers, you need to be very clear. Database management, the 4 components itself. People, right? You have the hardware or the computer components and the hardware software components. Then you have the people component. Then you have the data component and the network component. So please be very clear with each of those. In data, the concept of DBMS and the differences between DBMS. Expect a question on practical question on examples of those, right? Then you have this concept of data mining, big data, one of the short note questions. In network, I think you have the basis of network or the 4 factors. You have resiliency, bandwidth, correct? You have those 4 important factors which they speak of. Then the entire chapter rest focus on risk and controls. When you're reading this, please read the risk and control. Immediately jump a few pages, go to that audit trail points. So you'll be able to collectively read it much more faster. And there are this 4 system auditing objectives and types of audit, where you have concurrent model, continuous evaluation, system evaluation, all those things. That is something which you can look into. Then you have audit trail and its objectives. And last is your org structure, roles and responsibilities. Quickly moving further in terms of chapter number 4, you have the e-com versus traditional business. A very simple question. Benefits and all these things are story. There is this architecture diagram of e-commerce. It looks like a robot, which I have told you, right? It comes with a box and all these fancy things, right? So that's something mentally you should be prepared. Law governing e-commerce is a very simple thing. You can just write GST, income tax, all those things. Digital payments, expect a question on what are the modern methods of digital payments, etc. Computing technologies, virtualization, grid computing, cloud. Please be very, very clear with these fundamental concepts. In cloud, the concept of the difference between that, hybrid model, public cloud, private cloud, and you also have this IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. I keep on telling, kyunki SaaS bhi ek cloud model thi, correct? So SaaS is a cloud service model. So please be very, very, very clear with this. Mobile computing, grid computing, or Web 3.0, all these are very small areas which they can ask you. IoT, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. These are again very short note questions which can come up, 2 marks questions. Last is core banking system. Overview of banking business. What are the typical challenges faced? Here they may ask you about the architecture and this general controls applicable in a bank. What are the general controls? That's a fairly long section where they speak of the functional and technical architecture. And then comes very, very specific on requirements or process flows with respect to specific areas. It could be mortgage, it could be treasury, and mortgage, I told you, is like a housing loan sort of thing. And last comes your regulatory compliance. I think that's a small section. So few answering strategies. Answer the question first. Read the question paper properly. Many times a common topic could be found between chapters. Be very careful about it. Give subheadings, bullet points I've been telling you. Give enough sufficient space. So if you have done with sub question 1, if there is a lot of space, leave some space and then write answer to sub question 2, right? Do not try to be a miser in terms of page. It is okay, waste over to ho gaya, no problem, right? And begin every question with answer to sub question 1A, 1B, 1C. I think I've already spoken. Mistakes to be avoided. Now, when they ask you questions like this, present it like this, data and information. There's a clear-cut case where the student has written it very clearly for a 2 marks question, 1.5 marks. He or she has got it, right? Next, if you try to put in this way, the marks, the answer is right, but unfortunately, the marks awarded is 0. For a simple reason, we do not know whether it's 1C or 1E. I think I've made a mention of this multiple times. So please be extra cautious when you're writing that, right? And they've given a beautiful flowchart structure. They've written the perspective, right? And they've got the marks for that. So for every step, you will get marks in your examination, right? So just like how you have a dance step for this process, you have the steps, you will be given the marks, right? So please be very, very cautious and don't try to do mischief around or don't try to change the order of the question. Okay. And answer to the point, don't give unwanted information, keep it very, very specific, right? And this is one of the cases which they had asked of. So last but not the least, I know we are running short of time because you have to go prepare well, right? So change in approach is need of the hour, especially for this EIS paper. Slightly you'll have to tweak your approach, right? Chain is as strong as its weakest link. Remember, life is much, much larger than beyond EIS and the examination. I'm sure you'll be able to crack this with flying colors. CA exam is not a storm. Be happy, be confident. I'm sure all of you will crack this and do it really, really well. And do not worry what to do after the next 3 days of the examination. There's a lot of options available. Focus on the exam. All right. So thank you so much, my dear friends. Be calm, relax. What is over is over. Don't think I answered this wrong. I answered this wrong. Rather see what is left in your hand and focus on how best you can do. Thank you so much. All the very best. I'll be excited to meet all of you in the pass out session. All the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.